Well, thank you very much for being here. My name is Oscar Delgado, and I would like to talk today about visibility. So to start this presentation, I would like to tell you why I'm here and why I asked for this opportunity. So before being a detection engineer, I was an industrial consultant. And part of my role was to gather information from different clients, right? Start absorbing that information, understanding that information, and then present a report to them with opportunities for improvement. During one of such engagement, I mentioned that this specific client has low visibility, right? What happened is after I delivered the report, we have an opportunity to meet and we discuss everything, right? And this particular client was challenging my statement. They say, no, we don't have low visibility. We have medium visibility. Obviously, I was prepared for that, and I start presenting all the evidence that I have for what I believe they have low visibility. But yet they still say, no, we have medium visibility. And I was a little bit shocked at the beginning because, okay, we were looking at the same evidence, but we were drawing different conclusions. And then I realized, well, there is no standard for visibility. Right? There is no universal way to say what is visibility. So at this point, what we were discussing is their concept of visibility versus my concept of visibility. And we have different backgrounds. So it makes sense that we have different concepts of visibility, right? So that was the first thing that I said, okay, we need to do something about that. But I'm here because they asked a second question. And for me, it was very, very interesting. So they say, okay, Oscar, let's assume that you're right and we have low visibility. We have some budget, right? And we want to do a smart investment of that money, right? So we want to know where will be the priority. So we move from this low visibility to medium visibility. And if you start thinking about that question, it involves several things. So first, we need to move beyond the concept of like my opinion versus your opinion. We need to agree on what is visibility, right? We need to define some way. We need to get a definition of something rational about visibility. Then we need to find a way to make it repeatable, right? Because we need to do now, make some changes, and do again the same calculation, the same way that we are evaluating visibility, so we can track this process. And then we need to make that traceable, right? Because in the future, if we want to look back and analyze why we're taking this decision or this path, we need to be able to say, yes, it's because of this. So we need a system that is rational, that is repeatable, and is traceable. And while looking for that answer for the client, I started learning a lot of things, and that's why I'm here today. I want to share with you what I learned in that process. So what we have learned at this point. So we know that visibility is subjective, and it's a subjective, it's intangible, right? And there is no standard scale for that. Yet, it's very, very important. If you go upstairs and you start going through the vendors, you will notice that everyone is talking about visibility. And they often say, like, okay, we need better visibility, more visibility. So it's very, very important. And in ICS, in cybersecurity, in business, in operation, it's very, very important that you have visibility. So it's a driving force for business and for many things, but it's, at the same time, it's intangible. It's something that we cannot define very well. So this is an attempt to do it. So, okay, how we can do that? I started looking around, and I realized that this is not a unique problem for ICS. We see things like that, trying to measure intangible things all the time. So I said, okay, that's great. We can learn from that. I put here a couple of examples, and I want to draw attention to the second one, because for me, it was very, very interesting. What happens when a patient enters a hospital or a health facility? One of the first things they do is try to evaluate the overall health, right? Overall health is also something that is very intangible. But what they do is they look at the vitals of the patient, right? So it's not actually the criticality of the health, because we cannot measure that, but we start looking information around, right? So, okay, we start looking at the temperature, at the blood pressure, and other indicators. And the combination of all of them is giving us the information that we need about the health of this patient, right? So I said, okay, that's very, very interesting. And the other part is that Those pieces of information are not random, right? They are answering a specific question. And I learned, for example, that when they look at the temperature, it's not just because they want to know if it's hypothermia or fever, because during the diagnosis, they can use that information. And there are some pathologies that they manifest with fever. So if the patient has fever or not, they know what path. So they are answering other questions based on that information. So these pieces of information that they're using to measure, they are some relationship to what they want to know, which is the health of the patient. I started analyzing several cases, and I found this pattern. So, okay, we have something intangible, something that we cannot measure, but there are other things that we can measure. And these things are related to what is our target. And I call this the proxy, right? So we have these several proxies that they are conveying information about our target, right? So what we learn, okay, yes, I hope that we agree that visibility is intangible, but we can measure if we find the proxies, if we found the pieces of information that reveals what we need to know about this visibility. Awesome. So now what? So how we identify what piece of information we need to collect in order to have the visibility that we want? So the first attempt was, okay, what if we try to collect everything, right? And somebody will argue that this is probably the goal. In my opinion, this is dangerous because it's very inefficient, right? If you try to put information that is valuable and hidden between like layers and layers of other information, you are making other teams to spend time just digging to find what is the actual piece of information. But it's also something that is expensive because data is expensive, right? You think of data, okay, you need to storage data, you need to transfer data. Sometimes when you start dumping more and more data, you need to start changing the assets, right? The processing, you need more things. So it's expensive. And I say, okay, we don't want this approach and we cannot afford this approach of just collect everything and say, yes, we have visibility. So what was the answer? So we start reflecting. I say, okay, when you ask about what pieces of visibility or what is the visibility, the question that I have for you is how are you going to use that visibility, right? Because there is no visibility for the sake of visibility. If you go to a refinery manager or to a plant or water treatment plant director and you ask them their goal, I don't think they're saying, oh yes, I hope that we identify all the protocols in our control network. That's not realistic because visibility is not the final purpose. For them, is okay, the refinery they want to provide the gasoline, the diesel, jet fuel, right? And for the water treatment plant, they want to provide clean water to a community. That's the goal. Visibility is a tool that several teams in the organization are using to help to support that goal, right? So, okay, so in that case, what we want is to talk with those teams, right? And start identifying what pieces of information they need. But we are not going just to provide information for the sake of information. We are going to provide information because somebody needs that information, and we want to be greedy about that information because it has a cost. We want to provide exactly what they are requiring. So what can be used as a proxy? My answer is whatever information the organization needs, right? If there is a team that has a valid need for that organization, in my opinion, that is a valid proxy, right? But I have 3 steps before I say, yes, okay, this is something that we want to provide visibility. First, is somebody going to use that information and how they are going to use it? And this is very important because how they are going to use it specify what exactly they need. And sometimes we think that visibility is just to show everything. No, okay, exactly what is the part of that you need to know in order to achieve your goal. So we need to know how it's going to be used and have these 2 pieces. Then we start seeing like, okay, it's something that we actually can collect. Sometimes it's, hey, I would like to have this piece of information, but unfortunately it's very expensive, or unfortunately that provides other risk for the organization. So, okay, something that we can do it. And third is the quality of that information. And if you remember the second question, they want to know from here, they want to go from low to high visibility, making an investment, right? So they are making a business decision. So it makes sense that somehow they want to ensure that the data that they're using to estimate, to have an insight of the visibility has some value, that is accurate, right? So we need to start thinking how we are going to evaluate that data. And here is a sample for that. So let's say that somebody is asking for information for the hardware, right? So first, if there is a usage for that, yes. Somebody needs to know if we have some vulnerability installed in our environment. Okay, there is an ask. What information do you need? Usually you ask for the model, for the vendor, firmware, series, okay? What about the color? Is it important to know the color of the equipment? Might be, maybe not, but that is something that must be part of the request, okay, how you're going to use it. Then we start looking at the source, and the source is a little bit related with quality. If you ask me for asset information and I give you back all the contract and all the data sheets in paper from the installation from 15 years ago, is that reliable information? Is accurate information? I can say that I'm trying to answer what is your request, but is really helping you? So we need to look at everything when we are looking at the proxies. And now, I say that visibility is not the final purpose. It's a tool for the organization, for the whole team. So it makes sense that the visibility is coming, that the requests are coming from different places. And I often see that people think that visibility is limited to security, to maybe network, but visibility is actually involving several teams. So business has some visibility needs, the security, the operations, and very often they overlap. So when you start seeing, okay, what do you need? Okay, I can answer this request using this proxy or this piece of information. And it makes sense that you want to address all of them at the same time because it's more efficient and it's cheaper, right? So you have all these. And the idea is that every time you receive a request, you start doing the same evaluation. Have a usage, the specification, the source, and the quality. What is the goal? The goal is to have something like this. I call it visibility collection framework, just to give it a name. But the idea here is that you go beyond something that is a concept and you start formalizing, right? So for me, this is just a way to formalize things. So now it's like, okay, we have a document that says exactly what are the visibility needs for our organization. And I can start saying why we need, and if somebody asks, I can justify, okay, this is need because some group in our team needs to know this, and they need these specific pieces of information, and that's why I'm caring to collect it, okay? Now, is that the whole thing? No. And if you remember, the question was how we can start prioritizing like the investment, so we move from one point to another. So what we need is a way to combine. And if you go back to the example of medicine with the patient triage, they have all the indicators, but at the end they try to combine everything. It was not just one of them. They try to have, okay, overall, how we combine. And I start thinking, okay, what is the best way to combine all the proxies in order to provide this visibility metric? And unfortunately, this is depends. So what happened is I really tried to say, okay, there is a method that we can apply to different organizations, but it has so many variables that it was not possible, at least for me. So what was one of the issues is, what is your purpose of the visibility? So for that team, when, in my example, they need to support a business decision. So for them, they need to know, okay, I need to have a score. That was my goal. That's why I need to have this visibility kind of metric inside, right? There are other things that they want to start, for example, looking at what are their weaknesses, right? They need to identify, okay, I'm doing good maybe with hardware information, but I need to improve my networking. For them, having low, medium, or low, medium, high, it doesn't make sense. Like, okay, how is that addressing my visibility need? There are others that are responding, for example, they want to know what is the pieces of information that the organization relies the most on, and they want to have redundancy on that. So, okay, so you need to identify what is the goal of the organization, and then you can define, okay, what is the method that can suit that goal, that they can provide the visibility that they need, right? Sometimes it's just the proxy. Sometimes just having this formalization is enough, but that depends on the organization and the maturity. One thing I learned, so I start explaining these ideas and sharing with different groups with my friends in the refineries and the water treatment plants. I learned that first, you sometimes can overwhelm teams if you provide too much information, right? If you start dumping everything at them and you start having a complex methodology to combine, they won't trust the system because it's too complicated, it's difficult to understand, and they don't believe in that in visibility metric. But if you go to the other extreme and you have a very sophisticated team that they have a specific request and you start giving something that is very simplistic, they say, okay, this is not something valuable. This is probably something that is naive and we don't want to use. So here is kind of the Goldilocks approach that you just meet right for the organization. When I have the second question, we say we need something that is rational, something that is repeatable, and something that is traceable. One thing I didn't mention is what's something perfect. And that's very, very important because your needs and the organization needs and the way that you are going to provide the information that they need might change as the company grows, as the teams start progressing and they have more insight. And you need to be prepared for that. So my advice will be always try to document so you can go back. And I think from this slide, I want to highlight the fourth line. That is, have a time to review the process. You will need, in my experience, you will need to go back to the design board very often. I start adjusting team, having feedback from your team. So just be prepared for that. Now, what we have learned so far, that visibility is something that is subjective, yes. We can measure if we have proxies, but the first thing is to define the purpose of the visibility, why you want to have visibility in the first place, because there is no visibility for the sake of visibility. I put some tests when I'm doing, after doing this and I wrap everything, I have my documentation, I usually send this to another team and ask them, okay, can you give me what is my visibility? And if they can follow, they understand the method and do the calculation without me having to step every time to explain, I think it's decent. It's okay, we are getting somewhere. If not, it's either because I'm doing something that is very, very complicated and I'm not explaining well, or because the documentation is not providing the right information. I would like to go next and discuss an example of water plant. So at this point, I just want to a quick recap of what we have talked until this point, right? So we have the goals, the proxies, then we define what sources, define how we are going to evaluate each one, combine the methods, and document the process. And I usually think that it's a great idea to start exposing this as early as possible. You want to have all the teams involved having some type of feedback and start getting all this information. And I will discuss caveats towards the end, but this also helps a lot to overcoming bias. So, okay, let's look at an example. So this is a different plan from the beginning. This is a water treatment plan, and this is a press release for that. So I just want to notice that this is a small plan and minimum personnel. And this is true for a lot of water treatment plants, right? So this is a true example. So we start like, okay, let's gather all the requests for information. We want to know what is the components of visibility that you need to know, right? And I found when I was working with water treatment plants, something that is very important, and is that very often the technicians in charge of the plant, they are also in charge of IT, also in charge of OT, and when there is time, like extra time, they are in charge of security. So, and that's one of the reasons why I say, like, okay, yes, just dump everything at them, and sure, yeah, that will help with the visibility of the plan. So, no, in this case, okay, let me know what you need. I know that you are overworked. Let me know how I can help. So they need just specific information trying to do their job. So, okay, I convert that to the table because the step is, okay, I want to formalize this. So when we are having visibility discussions, we have some document that we can refer. And I start providing some indication of what means quality for each of these proxies, right? And then again, this is a small team. They were just starting, so they want to have a high view of the visibility, right? They decide that the best option for them was just to see and score like, okay, we are doing from the maximum visibility that we can have, just add all the scores and have three levels for that. we go with them and we start looking at the different components, and they decide, okay, right now we are a medium visibility based on our criteria, right? And here starts happening something very important is before it was my concept of visibility versus their concept of visibility. Now, by doing this, we have kind of an agreement, right? We have a contract. It's not perfect. I'm not saying this is the best way, but it's a contract between the two of us, right? So this is what we agree will be the visibility. And now we can start identifying some weakness, right? We say, okay, if I need to prioritize, I will start addressing these issues first, because based on our methodology, these are the issues that we have with visibility. And one big caveat is this only makes sense with the method, right? Because we defined the method and our method was to add all the scores and have these levels, okay, we can do that. If you change the method, if you decide, no, this is not the way that I want to measure visibility, you need to, this is not making sense. So this always be tied to the method. Now, what happened? If there is any project engineer here, I'm sorry. This is gross oversimplification, but what happened is now you have, because you have all this structure behind, you can start looking at something interesting, right? So you can start seeing, okay, if this is my target for visibility, if this is how I measure visibility, now I can start putting dollars into this, right? The C here is Canadian dollars or Colombian pesos, whatever you like. And I can start putting that into my calculation, right? So I have my typical methods for evaluating projects. I have the net present value, return on investment, whatever you like. But now I can have, from the visibility perspective, if we implement this project, we will have this advantage. Again, this is tied to the methodology. This only makes sense inside that methodology, right? So they have different options and they decide, okay, we are going to use this kind of framework to go with the project number 1, and we are going to get a new tool to do automatic asset identification. Great, so you increase your completeness and your accuracy. So again, because this system, and we have a set of rules, we can repeat the calculation using the new information, and they say, okay, we go and we have high visibility now, and everybody's happy, right? So what is the conclusion for this? Is this perfect? No, I don't know. Maybe there was a better project for them. But we move beyond opinions, right? We are not longer in what I believe. We have a contract, we have the set of rules, and using those rules, this is what makes sense at the time, or what we believe it was the correct decision. 2 years down the road, you can think, okay, no, this was actually really bad for the team. But we can go back. We can go and start tracing, okay, why we make this calculation, and we can identify exactly what we wrong and start correcting that. But now it's not an opinion. We're moving beyond that point. And I think that's the value of having something that is like a framework more formalized. By now, I think you already identify several flaws of this system. And I'm going to share the ones that I identify while doing this. So first, bias. What happened is the proxies and the methodology depends a lot of your background, right? If you ask the incident response team about, okay, what should be the components of visibility, what we need to start getting as visibility, you get one set. Ask the same to the threat hunters, and you get some other response. Add to operations, and you will get another response. Some of them overlap, yes, but you will have differences, right? And if you only include one team when doing this, then you are addressing the visibility needs of that team, but you are neglecting the other teams. So there is a bias there. And there are also bias with the methodology. So how do you combine these to get the visibility? If you are familiar with decision trees, I will get that probably somehow you will start trying to implement decision trees to get your visibility score, right? And to measure that for maturity. It might be the correct way to do it, it might not, right? And you need to start exposing. So for me, the only way to start working over bias is to start exposing this to all the people interested and say, okay, this is how we are going to do it. What do you think? And get this feedback as early as possible. The second issue, and for me this is the most important issue, is when the score becomes more important than the actual information. And I'll give you 2 examples. So first, let's imagine that you have a really bad asset inventory, right? It's terrible. But somehow the other proxies are doing well, right? So when you have your combination, you have medium or high visibility. The question is that actually useful? Is that addressing, is that conveying the right information? If I say, yes, I have high visibility, yeah, I have a crappy asset inventory, but who cares, right? So is that a connection in that? And it's easy when you start doing some kind of numeric evaluation to start triggering the system to get a high score. Another example, imagine that you always buy the same brand of switches, firewalls, whatever. And you use always the same brand, the same model, and the same series. So you say, okay, in my asset inventory, what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate that information as default, because most of the time that is correct. And I'm going to increase the coverage because now it seems like all the switches are covered under my asset inventory. Yes, great. So now your coverage increased, maybe your visibility increased. But is that helpful? What happens with the people that are using that information and receiving that information and trying to determine if you have a vulnerable asset? It's important to know that, oh, yes, you have a really high score, but is the information important? So for me, this is one of the most critical caveats when dealing with that. And then we have the audits. And it's like, okay, we are taking business decisions here, right? So we are using this, it has a purpose. So you actually need to start thinking of who is going to review that data? What happens if you, for example, have bad data, you don't know it? How are you going to identify that? And there should be some way that you start looking and challenging the method and trying to make sure that whatever you are using is correct and is the best for the organization. So I think visibility is intangible, yes, but I think it's measurable if you define what is the purpose first. So next time somebody talks about low, medium, or high visibility, I hope you ask how they are measuring. Thank you very much. Yes, just please, if you have any question.
Thanks for your presentation, very interesting, and I love the graphics.
Thank you.
So you will say I'm picky and kind of going into nitty-gritty, but on some of the tables you had quality and score, and there for quality, I think for completeness you had 0 to 2, and accuracy was 0 to 1, and the score up to 6. Do you have a kind of scientific, did you have a scientific way of coming up with those numbers, or is it heuristics and just, you know, to simplify?
Basically, when I start looking at that, the quality sometimes this was very rough, right? So one is complete or not, and you will see that sometimes it was 0 or 1, right? There was one at 0, 2, it was, yes, we have some, it was none, some, or all of them. And there was one that it was actually 0 to 3. So it was not 0 to 2, but 0 to 3. And you have, like, for each one, every row, you have, like, 2 metrics, and it was just adding them. Like, okay, you think I have a accuracy, yes or no, is 1. You think you have subjective completeness?
Like, so that's subjective evaluation.
And yeah, that part is, but that part, you start going really, really into details, because I say, okay, if I am requesting this information, I'm providing that information. If it's yes, I'm providing this information, I'm going to say 1, or I'm going to say no. But at the same time, it start coming with, okay, but what if I provide most of the information, but not all, right? So how do you start getting that part?
Thank you.
No problem.
Do you think it would be reasonable to try and standardize this for a vertical?
I try to, like my background is water and refineries, and I try to start seeing, okay, is there something that I can go from the different refineries or from the different water treatment plants that I say is similar every time, so I can put it like at this?
Well, even just within refineries themselves or water plants themselves, is that even reasonable?
It's very, very difficult, because well, one, they have different needs, they have different technologies, they have different teams. So there are things that you can reuse, and things like, you say, okay, in general, you think that refineries, they have like bigger teams and a little bit of more budget. So water treatments, usually they are just starting. So there are things that you can reuse and say, yes, this probably applies more, but it has been very, very difficult, at least in my opinion, to get something that you say, yes, please, water, now this is the way.
Let's chat after.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.